On that stormy night, the noise of the city seemed irrelevant to me. I curled up in my study, holding that familiar book, The Lord of the Rings. I could always find a bit of peace from reality within its pages. Everything around me became blurred, and only the distant world of Middle-earth unfolded before my eyes. Each word felt like magic, drawing me into a place filled with wonder and adventure that night. It seemed as if fate had given me a gentle push. When a lightning bolt struck the night sky and hit my windowsill, I felt a dizzying sensation, and the world instantly lost its color. I suddenly opened my eyes and realized I was no longer sitting at my desk. The air around me was fresh, filled with the scent of earth and grass. Looking down, I saw that I was standing in the middle of a lush, green meadow, surrounded by vibrant grass and low shrubs. In the distance, a few small houses looked as if they had come straight out of a fairy tale. The rooftops were covered with thick vines, and smoke rose gently from the chimneys, signaling the peaceful warmth of this place. "Where am I?" I whispered, my heart racing. At that moment, a cheerful voice broke the silence. "Welcome to Hobbiton, my friend." I turned around to see a hobbit, dressed plainly and smiling warmly, walking toward me. He was short, wearing a green jacket, with a friendly smile that made it feel as if I had never been a stranger. In that instant, I understood no longer was I part of the modern world. I had crossed into Middle-earth, the world of the Lord of the Rings, and arrived in the Shire. "I'm Bilbo Baggins," he said, extending his hand, his eyes gleaming with a hint of mystery. "You must be from outside, right?" I was stunned, a mix of excitement and confusion swirling inside me. It all felt like a dream, but I knew deep down that this dream was no longer a dream. I had entered Bilbo's world, taken my first step into an adventure I had never imagined. Now, standing on the land of Hobbiton, everything around me felt so real. The air was filled with a carefree, tranquil atmosphere, yet my heart was filled with complex emotions. This was a new world, and my journey was just beginning. Reality often feels suffocating. Every day, as I navigate the concrete jungle, I often fantasize about escaping this dull life. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings became my lifeline whenever I opened its pages. The world of Middle-earth, full of miracles and adventures, acted like a window, temporarily taking me away from this noisy world. That night, as a thunderstorm raged outside, I curled up on the sofa, reading The Lord of the Rings. The movie soundtrack played through my headphones, and I could almost feel the smoke rising from Gandalf's pipe. However, just as I closed the book, a blinding flash of lightning struck outside the window, and everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself no longer in my familiar living room, but standing in the middle of an incredibly vast field. The sunlight gently bathed the green grass, and the air was so fresh it was intoxicating. In the distance, I could see rolling hills with small bridges and mills scattered across them. I froze. Could this be the Shire? My heart raced as I looked up and saw a familiar village, Hobbiton, lying peacefully on a hillside. Several round hobbit holes were built into the hillside, with bright yellow curtains fluttering in the wind, and flowers and plants surrounding the doors. Everything was exactly as described in the book, as beautiful as a painting. "Hello, are you new here?" A friendly voice broke my stunned silence. I turned around to see a small figure standing at the door of one of the Hobbit holes. He wore a dark green vest, held a pipe in his hand, and had a warm smile on his face. "You are," I stammered, both excited and nervous. "Isn't this Bilbo Baggins?" The Hobbit who brought the One Ring back to the Shire and unknowingly changed the fate of all Middle-earth. "Bilbo Baggins," he said, giving a slight bow with a self-satisfied expression. "The owner of this quiet corner of the world, Hobbiton." He looked me over, seeming puzzled by my appearance. "Your clothes are rather unusual. Did you come from a faraway place?" I looked down and realized I was still wearing a t-shirt and jeans, completely out of place among the Hobbit's rustic attire. But Bilbo didn't ask further questions, and instead kindly invited me inside. His Hobbit hole bag end was incredible. Beyond the round door, there was a long hallway decorated with intricate wood carvings and warm lighting. The fire in the hearth crackled, filling the room with warmth, while the smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the air. Maps and paintings adorned the walls. "Come, try this freshly baked bread," Bilbo said, handing me a golden loaf with a proud smile. I sat at the round table, watching his busy movements, and for a moment, I forgot the boundary between reality and fantasy. Bilbo was so welcoming, as if he had known I would come, and everything here seemed to be confirming that this was no dream. "Are you interested in adventure?" he suddenly asked, his tone laced with a hint of curiosity. Adventure. I was a bit confused, but a surge of excitement stirred inside me. After all, this was something I had always longed for. Bilbo smiled slightly, and a familiar gleam appeared in his eyes. "Perhaps your arrival is fate's design?" In that moment, I felt that my life was no longer just about turning the pages of a book, but becoming part of the story. The sunlight in Hobbiton filtered through the windows, and my adventure had only just begun. After settling into Bag End, life turned out to be more interesting than I had imagined. Bilbo was a warm and hospitable host, and his Hobbit hole always had a cozy atmosphere, like a place where time slowed down. And Frodo, more reserved than Bilbo, carried the weight of some youthful worries, but his eyes were always bright and clear. Living with them felt like stepping into a living storybook, where each day was filled with unexpected discoveries. Bilbo was an excellent cook, and he loved to experiment with new treats after breakfast. One morning, sunlight streamed through the round windows of the Hobbit hole as I sat at the table, watching Bilbo proudly show off his latest creation, a bread made with honey and walnuts. "Look, this is a secret recipe. Even Sam might not be able to make it," he said, his voice full of pride. "It must be delicious," I genuinely complimented, although in the modern world, I never imagined I would look forward to a loaf of bread so much. Whenever the bread was done, Bilbo would light his pipe and lean back in his chair. He said that after enjoying something good, a pipe of smoke was the perfect way to complete life. At first, I had no interest in tobacco, but under his influence, I began to try a pipe myself, and surprisingly, the spicy, slightly sweet aroma was oddly relaxing. Frodo, unlike Bilbo, wasn't much of a talker. He preferred quiet reading, and sometimes we would huddle together in the living room of Bag End, flipping through Bilbo's manuscripts that chronicled past adventures. These are all written by Bilbo himself. He said they were a gift for me, Frodo said, gently brushing his fingers over the pages, his tone full of respect and tinged with an unspoken worry. "You seem troubled?" I couldn't help but ask. He looked up at me with a faint smile, but didn't respond. At that moment, I felt there was something heavy in Frodo's gaze, as though he knew something I didn't. During my time in Hobbiton, I also gradually got to know the locals. Samwise Gamgee, a simple gardener, was always in clothes covered in dirt, busy trimming the roses outside Bag End. "Sir, are you pleased with these flowers?" he asked me with a grin, clearly thinking of me as one of the owners of Bag End. Then there were Merry and Pippin, two young hobbits who loved mischief. They would pull pranks all around the village, and one day, they even stuffed my shoes with strawberries. We just wanted to see if outsiders like surprises too. Pippin laughed as he explained. Though I was caught off guard, I couldn't help but laugh at their antics. However, as time went on, I noticed that sometimes, in the evenings, Bilbo would sit by the hearth, lost in thought. He often spoke of past adventures with excitement, but there was an underlying sense of regret and weariness in his tone. One time, he mentioned his encounter with Smaug in the Lonely Mountain, and a shadow seemed to pass over his eyes. "Adventures are wonderful, but dangerous," he said, slowly exhaling smoke. "They change you, and sometimes they make you lose something precious." Bilbo's words left me deep in thought, and Frodo only added to my confusion. His smile often seemed forced, especially when talking about Bilbo's adventures. A complex expression would cross his face, as if weighed down by a heavy secret. "Frodo, you don't seem happy," I try to open up to him. He quietly said, "Some responsibilities can't be avoided, just like how hobbits can never escape their love for the Shire." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there with many unanswered questions swirling in my mind. That night, I stood at the door of Bag End, gazing out at the fields of Hobbiton. The peaceful Shire looked like something out of a fairy tale, the village lights twinkling in the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that this haven might not remain peaceful forever. The wind seemed to carry some kind of forewarning, stirring an uneasy feeling within me. I began to realize that my arrival might not have been a mere coincidence. My story, perhaps, was only just beginning. The morning sunlight poured over the fields of Hobbiton, and the whole village was filled with a joyful atmosphere. It was harvest festival time. This was the busiest holiday of the year in Hobbiton, when hobbits from all directions gathered to celebrate the bountiful harvest of the land. The air was thick with the smell of freshly baked bread, and colorful ribbons adorned the village roads. The sounds of children laughing and music blended into a delightful symphony. "Come help out. Today is a big day," Frodo called out, grinning as he poked his head out from behind the door and waved at me. His face was much more relaxed than usual, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. I nodded and immediately joined his bustling efforts. We worked together to decorate the village square, hanging colorful lanterns from the tree branches, and helped Sam set up his pumpkin stand. "I'm going to win this year's pumpkin contest for sure," Sam said, wiping the sweat off his forehead, his face full of anticipation. I couldn't resist teasing him. "Even if you don't win, Rosie will still think you're the best gardener." Hearing this, Sam's face turned bright red, and he gave me a mock stern look before hurriedly turning to arrange his pumpkins. In the afternoon, the harvest festival officially began. The marketplace in the square was bustling with activity, with stalls lined up in rows, and hobbits enthusiastically greeting every guest that passed by. I was dragged into trying so much food: honey cakes, apple pies, fried fish cakes. Each bite was pure happiness. Musicians played lively tunes, and villagers danced in a circle. Even Bilbo joined in, his movements a bit clumsy, but his smile brighter than ever. "Come try the tug-of-war." Merry and Pippin pulled me over to a long hemp rope. They stood on the opposite team, giving me a playful wink. I laughed helplessly and joined Sam and other villagers on our team. With a whistle from the referee, everyone shouted in unison and tugged with all their might. The ground beneath our feet was slippery, and the scene was chaotic but full of joy. In the end, our team won, and Merry and Pippin, covered in mud, lay on the ground laughing uncontrollably. As night fell, the climax of the festival was the fireworks display. Gandalf did not disappoint. He brought forth a breathtaking display of fireworks. A massive golden dragon-shaped firework soared into the sky, twisting and turning in the night air, eventually transforming into countless sparkling stars. The villagers cheered, the children clapped, and even Frodo's eyes glimmered with rare brightness. However, amidst this joyful night, Bilbo sat quietly on the side. He held a pipe in his hand and gazed deeply at the night sky, seemingly lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" I walked over and asked softly. Bilbo didn't answer immediately. He took a long drag of his pipe and exhaled slowly. "I'm glad you've settled into our lives. But have you ever wondered why you ended up here?" I paused, a sense of unease sweeping over me. His words, though calm, felt like an invisible hammer striking my heart. I shook my head. "I don't know. I just appeared here suddenly." Bilbo turned his head to look at me, his eyes filled with some unspoken emotion. "Some things aren't coincidences," he said. "Sometimes we are chosen by fate to complete a task we don't yet understand." Have you ever felt that the peace in this world might just be a brief calm before the storm? I lowered my head, the events of the past few days flashing through my mind. From Frodo's worries to the occasional moments of contemplation from Bilbo, this seemingly peaceful land seemed to hide something. I looked up and asked, "Do you know something?" Bilbo fell silent for a moment before gently patting my shoulder. "Maybe it's not yet time to know everything, but remember, whatever happens, the hope of the Shire may rest on someone like you, a stranger." His words left me deep in thought. The joyous festival night seemed to suddenly carry a faint shadow. I looked up at the night sky, the stars still dazzling, but a quiet feeling lingered in my heart. An adventure was quietly drawing near. The hustle and bustle of the harvest festival gradually faded, but my heart could never calm again. How long could the peace of Hobbiton last? Perhaps my arrival was not just a coincidence. Bilbo Baggins' 111th birthday party undoubtedly became a grand event in the entire Shire. This birthday was not just a celebration of Bilbo himself, but a rare moment in the history of the Shire. The whole of Hobbiton was decorated like a dream, with colorful lanterns hanging along the streets, and the air filled with the scent of roasted meat, baked bread, and fruit wine. Every household had prepared carefully, looking forward to this grand gathering. The party took place in the courtyard of Bag End, with beautiful carpets spread over the lawn and long tables piled high with various kinds of food. The hobbits were dressed in their finest festival clothes, and laughter filled the air. Bilbo seemed like a jubilant ruler, his eyes always gleaming with mischievous light, which today shone even brighter. Both children and older hobbits gathered around him, seemingly with endless topics to share. I joined the crowd at the party, and although I ate, drank, and enjoyed like the other hobbits, I felt a different kind of nervousness and anticipation. Because today, in addition to celebrating Bilbo's birthday, the residents of Hobbiton would also witness an extraordinary announcement. The climax of the party arrived when Bilbo stood up, raised his cup, and smiled lightly. My dear friends, thank you all for taking the time to attend my birthday celebration. But today is not just a moment for my own celebration. He paused, glancing around at the eager faces. I've decided to leave the Shire and seek one last adventure. Perhaps it is time to say goodbye to this peaceful land. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hobbits, who loved peace and tranquility, were shocked that Bilbo, an elderly hobbit, would choose to leave everything behind and embark on an unknown journey. But what followed was even more astonishing. Bilbo pulled out a small golden ring and handed it to Frodo. "This is my gift, child," Bilbo said kindly. "It will keep all your secrets." I happened to be standing nearby and witnessed the entire exchange. The ring glimmered with a mysterious light, as if it contained some powerful force. Bilbo's gesture was not just a simple gift. It seemed to represent his deep trust in Frodo and hinted at some unknown fate awaiting him. Just then, a dazzling firework display interrupted my thoughts. Gandalf appeared at the corner of the party, and with a wave of his wand, a huge fireball shot up into the night sky, bursting into countless colorful lights that scattered like stars. The fireworks flickered in the sky, stunning in their beauty, and everyone looked up in awe, even Bilbo's eyes reflecting a warm glow. I walked over to stand beside Gandalf. He was dressed in his signature robe and high hat, wearing a playful smile. His deep eyes fixed on me, as if he already knew what I was thinking. "Do you like these fireworks?" he asked suddenly, his voice carrying a teasing warmth. "They're beautiful," I replied, but I couldn't help but feel a deep respect for the mysterious old wizard. Gandalf's aura and the magic he wielded seemed perfectly intertwined, as if he shared an unspoken connection with the ancient power of the land. "This is just the surface of the fireworks," he smiled. "You must learn to see deeper than appearances." He paused, as if considering something, then suddenly suggested, "Come, share a pipe of tobacco with me." I hadn't expected such an invitation. Though I knew what it meant, smoking with Gandalf was perhaps a privilege that an ordinary hobbit might never get. I nodded, and Gandalf took out his pipe, signaling for me to do the same. The smoke wafted gently through the air, carrying an enigmatic aura. "You know, fate is often something we cannot predict," Gandalf said, his low voice resonating through the smoke. Everyone has their own journey, and sometimes, when we least expect it, we are chosen by fate to become part of a larger story. I stared at him, a question rising in my mind. Are you hinting at something? Gandalf smiled faintly, a glint of mischief in his eyes. You'll know, sooner or later, he said, his gaze deepening. But not everyone can walk into this story as easily as you. Are you ready to face your own fate? I froze, my heart racing. In that moment, I suddenly realized that my arrival might not have been mere coincidence. Hidden in this peaceful land was a much greater secret, and I, unknowingly, had already become part of it. The party continued, with laughter and joy echoing beneath the night sky. But in my heart, a storm was already stirring this adventure. It seemed was only just beginning. Gandalf spoke, and his meaningful words were like a stone cast into the depths of my mind, causing ripples in my inner thoughts. The fate he spoke of seemed like an invisible guide, quietly intertwining between me and Frodo, and I couldn't help but feel that our peaceful and tranquil Hobbiton was slowly becoming more and more unfamiliar. A few days later, life in the Shire returned to its usual calm. The harvest festival celebrations gradually died down, and the villagers returned to their farmlands and homes, as if everything were back to normal. However, I began to notice some subtle changes. In the fields near Hobbiton, there were occasionally some unfamiliar strangers, whose movements were suspicious and behavior notably reserved. No one approached them. They seemed out of place, quietly appearing on the outskirts of the village. One evening, Frodo and I were about to head out to an orchard outside the village to pick some wild fruits when we suddenly saw figures at the edge of the woods. They were three strange men, dressed in plain gray cloaks, with serious expressions and steady steps, but they made no sound at all. A sense of unease washed over me. Though they hadn't posed any direct threat, their presence certainly raised suspicion. Frodo seemed to sense something amiss too, and he whispered, "Let's go back. We shouldn't get too close to them." However, my curiosity pushed me to find out who these men were. So, I quietly followed their tracks, making sure not to attract their attention. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the night began to fall, and the surroundings became more and more hazy. Just then, some strange bird calls broke the silence. Their screeches were harsh and unnatural. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, carrying a chilling air. We continued onward, and eventually saw the three men stop, beginning to speak in hushed tones. I crept closer, straining my ears to listen. Though their voices were low and muffled, I still caught a few words. Ring, darkness, cannot let it fall into their hands. My heart raced, and cold sweat broke out on my palms. Frodo and I quickly retreated, hiding behind a large tree, our hearts pounding like thunder. The men seemed unaware of our approach, so we quietly circled back to the village, returning to safety, but our minds were far from calm. Back at Bag End, I didn't rush to bed, but instead waited as the night deepened. The joyful memories of yesterday's festivities and fireworks still flickered in my mind, but reality felt increasingly heavy. I thought of Gandalf. Perhaps he knew something about these strangers. The next morning, I found Gandalf and told him about the previous night's events. He listened quietly, a flicker of deep concern crossing his face. "What you saw was not a coincidence," he said in a steady tone. "Though Hobbiton seems peaceful on the surface, the shadow of darkness is quietly creeping closer." Darkness. I frowned, trying to understand the meaning of his words. What do these strangers have to do with darkness? Gandalf nodded. Their appearance is connected to an ancient and powerful ring. He paused as if choosing his words carefully. "You've heard of Bilbo's ring, haven't you?" I nodded, my heart pounding. This was the same ring Bilbo had given to Frodo at the birthday party. It hadn't drawn much attention from me until now. I suddenly realized that this small golden ring seemed to carry an undeniable power. Gandalf continued, "This ring is no ordinary thing. It holds the power of dark forces. Bilbo and Frodo inadvertently brought it into the Shire, and its presence has attracted those who follow the shadows. These strangers are, in fact, scouts of the dark power. Their mission is to find the ring and take back the power that belongs to the Dark Lord." My mood grew heavier, and the world suddenly seemed much more complex and dangerous. I couldn't imagine that our peaceful and calm Hobbiton might be at the center of a great storm. "So, what should we do?" I asked, filled with confusion and fear. Gandalf gazed at me deeply, as if assessing my inner fear and resolve. "You and Frodo have a special mission. The ring's power cannot be used recklessly, but it cannot fall into the hands of the Dark Lord either. Your journey has just begun, and the future will be filled with trials, but you must walk it with determination." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but something deep inside me began to stir. Yes, Gandalf was right. No matter what, there was no turning back now. Frodo and I had to take on the responsibility of protecting the Shire, to safeguard the future of this peaceful land. At that moment, Frodo walked into the room, looking slightly weary. "What's going on?" he asked, seemingly already aware of the change in the atmosphere. I looked at him, a mixture of unease and resolve in my heart. "We're about to face some unusual challenges, Frodo. Are you ready?" Frodo was silent for a moment before nodding. "We'll face it together." His eyes were firm, as if already prepared to meet whatever came our way. And this was only the beginning. That night, the air was fresh, and the moonlight bathed the fields of Hobbiton, as if draping them in a silver veil. Bilbo's hobbit hole stood quietly in the night, everything around it exuding an unusual sense of peace. Inside, everyone had fallen into a deep sleep, but Gandalf and I remained outside, leaning against an old oak tree, sitting on a small wooden bench, savoring the rare calm. Gandalf lit his pipe, the blue smoke swirling and dissipating into the night wind, vanishing into the darkness. His eyes, peering through the smoke, seemed to gaze far beyond, as though seeing a world far beyond the one before him. My gaze drifted to the distant mountains, filled with questions and unease. "You know," Gandalf's voice broke the silence, "the Shire is not just a little corner of the world. It's a peaceful facade, but behind it lies an unknown danger." He slowly exhaled a puff of smoke, his eyes gleaming with a profound light. Evil forces, far greater than you can imagine, are quietly drawing near. I remained silent, but a chill ran down my spine. I had just learned from Gandalf that the shadow of darkness had already crossed the borders of Hobbiton, slowly creeping toward this once pure land. The name of this dark power had not yet fully surfaced, but the threat it posed was already undeniable. Gandalf's gaze remained deep, his voice steady. You may think that the Shire is safe, that everyone lives a simple and happy life, but that is not eternal. The existence of that ring is a great danger. Its power can not only change Hobbiton, but it could affect the entire world. I lowered my head, looking at the pipe in my hand, the smoke curling around my fingers, as though tangled with my thoughts. The ring, Bilbo's small golden ring, once just an inconspicuous object, had changed everything because of its existence. What do you intend to do? I finally spoke, my voice low, tinged with uncertainty. This question felt like a heavy stone pressing against my chest. Yes, Gandalf had revealed the truth, and now my choice seemed particularly important under this tranquil night sky. Gandalf's gaze slowly shifted toward me, his face devoid of urgency or reproach, only deep understanding. I hope you understand that this is not just Frodo's mission alone. You, or rather, both of you, must bear this responsibility together. I could feel the weight of Gandalf's words, the strength and determination in his tone. At the same time, a cold fear rose within me. I was not a hobbit. I didn't have Bilbo's wisdom and courage from years of adventure. I had once been just an ordinary city person, accustomed to the stories and books. And now everything before me was so real, so dangerous. Am I capable of this? I whispered, filled with confusion. I'm not sure I have the courage to face that dark force. Gandalf sighed gently, placing his pipe down, his gaze soft but firm. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. Are you willing to face your fears, to protect what you hold dear, to protect this peaceful land? I closed my eyes, letting those simple but profound words sink in. Yes, I knew now there was no turning back. Gandalf's gaze was like a key, silently unlocking the door inside me. I took a deep breath, and the inner turmoil and fear began to calm. I will stay with Frodo, I said at last, my voice steady. No matter how many difficulties lie ahead, I will face them with him. Gandalf nodded slightly, a smile of approval on his face. He gently patted my shoulder. You've made the right choice. Remember, this is not just an adventure. It concerns the future, the fate of everyone, and even the future of Middle-earth. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the night wind rustling through the treetops, bringing a chill with it. I looked toward the distant mountains, bathed in moonlight, as though they were silently calling me, urging me to take that step, to face the unknown adventure and challenges ahead. A feeling of indescribable excitement and unease filled me. I knew I had made my decision. Though the road ahead would not be easy, I also knew this path would determine the fate of many. I took another deep breath, the taste of tobacco lingering with a familiar warmth, as though reminding me that the peace of the past had ended and a new journey had begun. Gandalf stood up, smiling as he patted my back. Let's go. Tomorrow is a new day, and you and Frodo's journey will begin tomorrow. I stood up and watched him walk away, suddenly feeling that none of this was as unfamiliar as I thought. Perhaps it was Gandalf's presence, or perhaps I had already found my purpose. Whatever the reason, this night had sealed my change, and it had sealed my future. I looked at Bilbo's familiar hobbit hole, a sense of reluctance filling my heart, but also a sense of anticipation. The adventure ahead, though full of uncertainty, had begun, and I knew I was no longer the person who had once shied away from reality. I was someone with a mission, ready to embark on the unknown. Tomorrow, I whispered, let it begin. The mornings in the Shire are always warm, with sunlight streaming through the gaps in the oak tree branches and spilling onto the fields of Hobbiton. The air is filled with the fresh scent of earth and the aroma of early autumn fruits. I stand before Bilbo's hobbit hole, gazing at the land that once brought me peace and comfort, and a complex wave of emotion stirs in my heart. This was a place I once thought I would never leave, but now I know that leaving is an unavoidable decision. Frodo stands beside me, his expression seemingly unchanged, still bearing that gentle yet determined look, as if he has long been prepared for the challenges ahead. I know he harbors many unspoken doubts within. Though young, he carries a weight far beyond his years the ring, the fate of the Shire, and even the future of Middle-earth. Are you ready? I ask him, my tone light, but tinged with a hint of unease. Frodo nods, smiling as he answers. Perhaps one is never fully ready, but I know this path is one we must walk. His words, though brief, bring a sense of calm to my heart. It is the trust of a friend and our shared responsibility. The day before we leave, Hobbiton holds a simple but heartfelt farewell gathering. Villagers gather in the square, with flowers decorating the tables, food and drink in abundance, and laughter and songs filling the air. Bilbo, Merry, Pippin, and Sam are all present. Though everyone wears a smile, I can sense the reluctance and concern hidden behind those expressions. Sam has been by Frodo's side from the very beginning, his eyes full of loyalty and care, occasionally offering concerned words of advice. Bilbo seems somewhat distant, not interfering with our decisions, as if he has already seen through everything. He stands in the corner, sipping wine, with a faint smile at the corner of his lips. As an outsider, though not truly belonging here, I can still deeply feel the warmth of the people of Hobbiton. Everyone knows what our departure means, not just Frodo's and my adventure, but the end of an era. The peaceful life in the Shire will no longer be something they can control. Despite this, they express their blessings in the simplest of ways. I hope you can return safely. Merry pats my shoulder, his voice tinged with a touch of helplessness. Although I know this is far beyond what we could have imagined, he smiles, though it's clear he isn't entirely at ease. I return the smile, but countless questions rise in my heart. Is this path truly as dangerous as Gandalf has said, filled with threats we have yet to foresee? And am I truly prepared for this journey from which there is no turning back? As the farewell gathering draws to a close, night quietly falls. The stars over Hobbiton are like an endless curtain, twinkling with countless lights, as if sending us off in silence. We all pack our belongings, preparing to set out on our journey. Bilbo gently pats Frodo's shoulder and gives him an encouraging smile. Then he turns to me, his gaze filled with an indescribable complexity, as if saying goodbye and offering a word of advice. Be careful. Remember, no matter what happens, the power of the ring cannot be underestimated. I nod, warmth rising in my chest. Though his words are brief, I know that Bilbo's concern and worry are deeply hidden in those simple phrases. I answer, my voice trembling slightly, both with fear for the future and acceptance of the responsibility. Frodo smiles, gently patting my back. Let's go. We must leave the Shire as soon as we can. With our own thoughts weighing on our hearts, we set off on the unknown journey. Gandalf leads the way with determined steps, his shadow stretching in the moonlight. Sam follows closely behind, his gaze full of resolve. His brotherly bond with Frodo is deep, and that unspoken understanding and trust seem to tell me that, no matter how great the challenges ahead, they will face them together. As our footsteps carry us farther, Hobbiton slowly fades from view, the familiar sights gradually disappearing from sight. My heart grows heavier. Though this land is so peaceful and beautiful, I know that the road ahead will be filled with uncertainty and danger. Every step feels like walking on the edge of a cliff, and there is no turning back. Gandalf looks back at me, as if sensing the uncertainty in my heart. His eyes shine with wisdom, but he says nothing more. Our gazes briefly meet, as if silently exchanging a mutual understanding. We all know that on this road, each person must bear their own responsibility. And I, as an uninvited guest, stand at the crossroads of fate, ready to face my unknown mission. The mornings in the Shire are always warm, with sunlight streaming through the gaps in the oak tree branches and spilling onto the fields of Hobbiton. The air is filled with the fresh scent of earth and the aroma of early autumn fruits. I stand before Bilbo's hobbit hole, gazing at the land that once brought me peace and comfort, and a complex wave of emotion stirs in my heart. This was a place I once thought I would never leave, but now I know that leaving is an unavoidable decision. Frodo stands beside me, his expression seemingly unchanged, still bearing that gentle yet determined look, as if he has long been prepared for the challenges ahead. I know he harbors many unspoken doubts within. Though young, he carries a weight far beyond his years the ring, the fate of the Shire, and even the future of Middle-earth. Are you ready? I ask him, my tone light but tinged with a hint of unease. Frodo nods, smiling as he answers, perhaps one is never fully ready, but I know this path is one we must walk. His words, though brief, bring a sense of calm to my heart. It is the trust of a friend and our shared responsibility. The day before we leave, Hobbiton holds a simple but heartfelt farewell gathering. Villagers gather in the square, with flowers decorating the tables, food and drink in abundance, and laughter and songs filling the air. Bilbo, Merry, Pippin, and Sam are all present. Though everyone wears a smile, I can sense the reluctance and concern hidden behind those expressions. Sam has been by Frodo's side from the very beginning, his eyes full of loyalty and care, occasionally offering concerned words of advice. Bilbo seems somewhat distant, not interfering with our decisions, as if he has already seen through everything. He stands in the corner, sipping wine, with a faint smile at the corner of his lips. As an outsider, though not truly belonging here, I can still deeply feel the warmth of the people of Hobbiton. Everyone knows what our departure means, not just Frodo's and my adventure, but the end of an era. The peaceful life in the Shire will no longer be something they can control. Despite this, they express their blessings in the simplest of ways. I hope you can return safely. Merry pats my shoulder, his voice tinged with a touch of helplessness. Although I know this is far beyond what we could have imagined. He smiles, though it's clear he isn't entirely at ease. I return the smile, but countless questions rise in my heart. Is this path truly as dangerous as Gandalf has said, filled with threats we have yet to foresee? And am I truly prepared for this journey from which there is no turning back? As the farewell gathering draws to a close, night quietly falls. The stars over Hobbiton are like an endless curtain, twinkling with countless lights, as if sending us off in silence. We all pack our belongings, preparing to set out on our journey. Bilbo gently pats Frodo's shoulder and gives him an encouraging smile. Then he turns to me, his gaze filled with an indescribable complexity, as if saying goodbye and offering a word of advice. Be careful. Remember, no matter what happens, the power of the ring cannot be underestimated. I nod, warmth rising in my chest. Though his words are brief, I know that Bilbo's concern and worry are deeply hidden in those simple phrases. I answer, my voice trembling slightly, both with fear for the future and acceptance of the responsibility. Frodo smiles, gently patting my back. Let's go. We must leave the Shire as soon as we can. With our own thoughts weighing on our hearts, we set off on the unknown journey. Gandalf leads the way with determined steps, his shadow stretching in the moonlight. Sam follows closely behind, his gaze full of resolve. His brotherly bond with Frodo is deep, and that unspoken understanding and trust seem to tell me that, no matter how great the challenges ahead, they will face them together. As our footsteps carry us farther, Hobbiton slowly fades from view, the familiar sights gradually disappearing from sight. My heart grows heavier. Though this land is so peaceful and beautiful, I know that the road ahead will be filled with uncertainty and danger. Every step feels like walking on the edge of a cliff, and there is no turning back. Gandalf looks back at me, as if sensing the uncertainty in my heart. His eyes shine with wisdom, but he says nothing more. Our gazes briefly meet, as if silently exchanging a mutual understanding. We all know that on this road, each person must bear their own responsibility. And I, as an uninvited guest, stand at the crossroads of fate, ready to face my unknown mission. If you also enjoy The Lord of the Rings, feel free to leave a comment. Of course, since you're already fast asleep, no comment is the best comment. Thank you for listening, and good night with sweet dreams, my sleepy tiger.